Wow, that was crazy. What's good? It's Woog. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn just ended, and Chris Eubank Jr. won via unanimous decision with all three scorecards reading 116 to 112. I actually had it scored the exact same way, 8 rounds to 4. But that does not tell even half the story here. This was about as fan-friendly and appropriate of a grudge match as you can get in terms of how the action played out. This story couldn't have been written any better. This didn't end up being a super hyped fight that didn't live up to the hype. This lived up and probably exceeded the hype, which is very interesting given the background and all of the facts going into this one, from the difference in weight to the rehydration clause to the PEDs to Chris Eubank Jr. getting stopped by Liam Smith. This grudge match ended up resulting in an absolute dogfight. And it didn't start off that way. It started off a bit more tactical, even though Conor Benn came in like a lot of people thought he was going to come in throwing smoke. And it's interesting because when a lot of people were breaking this one down, and there were a lot of people split on this, but I feel like most people thought Chris Eubank Jr. was going to come away with the win here. Some people did pick Conor Benn. Let me be clear, but I think that most people, and I mean, the odds tell you Chris Eubank Jr. was supposed to win this fight, even though I thought that the odds were actually too close. I thought Chris Eubank should have been more like a minus 250, minus 300, not like a minus 140. I thought that that was giving Conor Benn way too much of a chance here. But when we actually saw the fight play out, I think that everything was on the table in terms of what could happen next. This thing had every viewer on the edge of their seat. This was something special. And it's only, again, appropriate, and it does the original fight, which was a lot more conventional of a fight, right? But this battle between their sons, these guys left it all in the ring. These guys put their heads down, and by the second half of this thing, these guys were in the proverbial phone booth, which was just jaw-dropping to watch. So what did we get here? Again, I think that when people were analyzing this matchup, they were saying, okay, well, it'll go well for Chris if these things are true. It'll go well for Conor Benn if these other things are true. Well, what happens if all of the things, both on the Chris Eubank Jr. side and on the Conor Benn side, are true? What if you check the boxes and check yes to each of those things? What do I mean by that? Was Conor Benn able to close the distance? Yes. Was Chris Eubank Jr. able to have moments where he was boxing effectively on the outside? Yes. Was Chris Eubank Jr. able to land some nicely timed uppercuts? Yes. Was the weight cut going to be difficult for Chris Eubank Jr. and make things more difficult for him? Yes. Was the size going to be an issue with Chris Eubank Jr. being 2 natural divisions bigger than Conor Benn? Yes. Was Conor Benn going to have the explosiveness and power to hurt Chris Eubank Jr.? Yes. Was age going to be a factor in how it played into Chris Eubank Jr.'s legs, especially in the second half? Yes. Was Chris Eubank Jr.'s experience going to help him shine when he needed it to help him shine the most? Yes. Was Conor Benn going to be able to take Chris Eubank Jr.'s power? People were talking about, can Conor Benn hurt Chris Eubank Jr.? Well, what about the 147 guy taking a 160 guy's punch? Could he take Eubank Jr.'s power? Yes. And was that stoppage loss to Liam Smith and him getting chinned in the past, Chris Eubank Jr. getting chinned a couple fights ago, was that going to make him more vulnerable in this fight? Yes. So all those check boxes for each guy's like keys to victory, they were pretty much all yes. And the result of that, because of that, we got the absolute dogfight that we ended up getting. This was brilliant stuff. And I just have to make mention, that moment where the vehicle arrives and you could kind of see in the window, you could see Chris Eubank Jr. is about to exit, like he's pulling up to the stadium, right? But the door that's nearest the camera who's shooting the arrival of the vehicle, it opens up and it's Chris Eubank, not Jr., but Sr., who I just saw that interview from him a few days ago talking about how the fight was a farce, how he wouldn't support it, how his son wouldn't listen to him, this and that. It was Chris Eubank Sr. coming out of the vehicle through one door and Chris Eubank Jr. exiting the other door, and then them coming together and walking in together. that gave me chills. I ain't gonna lie. That was one of those moments. And, Chris Eubank is such a showman. Like, he just has that whole, like, when he shows up, like, ta-da, like everything about him is presentation, right? But yeah, that was a riveting moment. And you could hear the crowd in the stadium erupt when they saw that on the big screen. So I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, once this fight started, one of the questions again was, is Conor Benn going to be able to hurt Chris Eubank Jr.? And you could tell in that first round with the types of punches that Conor Benn was throwing. Yep. That guy was throwing smoke in the first round. He was trying to get this thing up and over with quickly. And Chris Eubank Jr. was, making a miss with most of it, but Conor Benn would also throw this chopping right hand and was trying to rough him up on the inside and kind of hitting him in the side of the head. They were kind of hitting each other in the clinch. So this one got rugged pretty early. You saw Chris Eubank Jr. trying to lean on Conor Benn, when he would tie him up and kind of walk forward, walk Conor Benn back. But Conor Benn was also very physically formidable. Like, he was a smaller guy, let's be clear, but he had a physical presence in there. He wasn't just getting sunned. He wasn't just getting big brothered by Chris Eubank Jr. So look, this is how I had the fight. I had Chris Eubank Jr. winning 8 rounds. I had Benn winning 4. The 4 that I gave to Benn were the second, the third, and we're going to talk about the third. And then I had Chris Eubank Jr. winning the next 4, like 4 in a row. And then I gave Conor Benn the 8th round, and I gave him the 10th round. So by the 11th round, when I thought I saw Chris Eubank Jr. win the 11th, I thought that he pretty much sealed the deal, and it would take at least a knockdown for Conor Benn to pull it out via decision. But again, this whole fight, you're just on edge because you're looking at these guys' body language and you're looking at what they're throwing and you're seeing the ebbs and flows and you're seeing this guy get hurt, then this guy get hurt, and this guy get backed up. There were times in this fight where I thought either guy was going to get stopped. And in that third round, it was abundantly clear. Yes, the answer is yes. Conor Benn can hurt Chris Eubank Jr. He hurt him in the third round. And, being that Chris Eubank Jr. is 35 and he got hurt, pretty visibly in that third round, I'm thinking, oh boy, he's already hurt. And it's the third round. This could be a long night or a short night for Chris Eubank Jr. So I'm like, this is not good. Because look, I picked Chris Eubank Jr. to win. I picked Eubank Jr. to win via stoppage. I thought that he was going to exercise class and was going to separate himself on the scorecard and then punish him and then stop him. I thought that's what we were going to get. We didn't get that. We didn't see the outclassing. We saw moments of Chris Eubank Jr.'s classy boxing. We saw moments of him looking like the more experienced guy, moments of him, more of the sweet scientist. But by and large, this one became a battle of attrition to where Chris Eubank Jr. started relying less on the movement, less on distance control, and from the middle rounds on, started standing his ground and walking Conor Benn down and indulging in the phone booth fight. And that just made for exhilarating TV. So I had mentioned Chris Eubank Jr. got hurt in the third round. I thought that I saw Conor Benn get buzzed a couple times in the late rounds, especially in like the 12th round. I thought that there was a moment where it's like, damn, is Chris Eubank Jr. about to get the finish against Conor Benn? Conor Benn was against the ropes. He was getting hit cleanly with these shots. Look, props to Conor Benn for having that chin. First of all, he seems like he put on weight pretty well. And historically, when you look at these multiple division jumps, look at the recent ones in history. I always point to Mikey Garcia going up multiple divisions to challenge Errol Spence. He got schooled. He got beaten up and schooled, but it went the distance. But it went terribly for Mikey Garcia. Amir Khan jumped multiple divisions to fight Canelo Alvarez. He got knocked unconscious. That was devastating. Brutal knockout. Guillermo Rigondeaux went up multiple divisions to fight Lomachenko. He, quit on the stool. He got embarrassed, outboxed, outclassed. He just had no business in there with Lomachenko. He was older than him and a lot smaller than him. And then you had, Kell Brook going up multiple divisions from 147 to 160 to fight Triple G. He started pretty nice in the first couple rounds, ended up getting a broken orbital, got stopped like in the 5th or 6th round, and Kell Brook's career was never the same. So I thought that it was a possibility that this could be a disaster for Conor Benn, but he seemed like he put on the weight pretty well. Again, he took a very good punch because look, Chris Eubank Jr. has stopped middleweights and 168 pounders. I know Chris Eubank Jr. later in his career started adopting that poor man's Roy Jones style, but he can crack. I mean, he's one of the only two guys to stop Liam Smith. Chris Eubank Jr., remember the beating that he put on James DeGale? He retired former IBF 168-pound champ James DeGale. It was a decision, but he put a beating on DeGale. Like, Chris Eubank Jr. can thump. Well, Conor Benn took all those shots. So props to him. And again, his punch carried so surprisingly. And again, he hurt Eubank Jr., and that wasn't the only time he hurt Eubank Jr. You know, maybe some of the times it was Eubank just looking off balance. Like, he looked like his legs were less steady in a lot of different parts of this fight, because again, they were always throwing a lot of dangerous punches. Some of them were missing, some of them were grazing, some of them were landing flush. So again, this was just a barn burner of a very high volume, just high activity, high action fight. But sometimes when Eubank would get landed on, his feet would look like he's kind of falling forward, and like it's a possibility that he might face plant at some point. And after seeing him get hurt in the third round, you got the impression that Conor Benn just needs to land another really good shot to get Chris Eubank Jr. in trouble again. Now, I don't think Chris Eubank Jr. was ever in that type of trouble again. But again, there were moments where it's like, is Eubank Jr. hurt? You know, because again, you would see his body language, you would see his feet get kind of knocked off balance, and you just didn't know if he was hurt or not. And again, we saw Eubank Jr. hurt Conor Benn, especially later on in the fight. But Eubank Jr., you know, exercised his jab, you know, pretty well, was, you know, sticking him, but he couldn't keep the distance. You know, when he would have moments of maintaining range well, Conor Benn would find a way to get inside and to start mixing it up. And there was a point, and I think that it was because, again, 35 years old, Conor Benn working Eubank Jr.'s body, the weight cut. I think Chris Eubank Jr. had to start planting his feet and couldn't move around as much and had to indulge in that firefight up close. And yes, at the end of the day, he was the bigger guy, and even in the phone booth, he was backing Conor Benn up and doing the better work, and he was winning those rounds, most of them, right? So Conor Benn would have moments in these rounds, but Chris Eubank Jr. would be putting nice combinations together: uppercut, jab, straight right hand, left hook. He would just be putting them together, and Conor Benn would just be sometimes whiffing on these big home run shots. Again, Conor Benn was trying to take his head off, and I was also surprised that Conor Benn was able to throw so hard even late in the fight. I don't know if he was hitting as hard as he was in the first few rounds. I tend to believe no, just because of natural attrition and natural fatigue. But again, I was really impressed by how Conor Benn was able to fight a middleweight across 12 rounds. So Chris Eubank Jr., again, won the fight via unanimous decision. I thought that he won pretty clearly. And Eddie Hearn said he didn't agree with 8-4. Well, look, all three judges had 8-4. I had 8-4. I think the AI judge had it 9-3. Carl Frampton, if I'm not mistaken, had it 8-4. I think 8-4 was pretty much the way to go. That's not to say that some of those rounds that Eubank Jr. won weren't competitive, but, you know, you could win a lot of competitive rounds and still, you know, pull off each or several of those rounds. And I think that that's what we got here, where Conor Benn can have a couple of the louder moments, right? Where it's like, oh shoot, what happened? But then Chris Eubank Jr. settles back in, hits him with like a, 4 out of 6 punch combination, things like that. So Chris Eubank Jr. wins, unanimous decision. Conor Benn looked like he was shattered. I mean, he brought it, right? He really, really brought it. He was so disappointed at the end of it. Chris Eubank Jr. and his dad, Eubank Sr., were like celebrating like so crazy. It was a very emotional looking fight, and the result and the post fight, it was all, a family affair. So, I mean, what happens next? I don't know how popular this opinion would be, but I wouldn't be mad at seeing Chris Eubank Jr. just walk off into the sunset. I know a lot of people want to see the rematch. I want to see Conor Benn go back to 147 for maybe 1 or 2 fights. I would say selfishly that I would like to see Conor Benn try things out at 154, but the waters are deep, and Conor Benn wasn't a big 147. But look, Conor Benn doesn't need to be fighting any more middleweights, right? This was just a one-off because of the circumstances. Conor Benn needs to be either at 154 or 147. If he fights 147, I would pick him over Mario Barrios. I wouldn't have any hesitation at picking Conor Benn over Mario Barrios. Now, Boots Ennis or Brian Norman, I think I would pick Conor Benn I don't know, Conor Benn versus Brian Norman, that one's tough because Brian Norman's a little bit of a wild card. I don't know exactly what we have in him. Hell, I don't know exactly what we have in Conor Benn, but I know a lot more today than I did before this fight between Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Conor Benn is an absolute dog. So is Eubank Jr., by the way. Like, look at his face. I mean, I know it was a headbutt that caused that nasty cut over his eye, but you see how fattened up his face was on both sides. Like, Chris Eubank Jr. looked like he had been in a war. Like, he looked like he took more of a beating, just visibly. I mean, and maybe it's just because his skin marks up a lot more, but he looked like he was in worse off shape than Conor Benn at the end of that fight. But again, I wouldn't be mad at Chris Eubank Jr. riding off into the sunset. I mean, you just scored that big bag, take the win. No need. I mean, I know, again, a lot of people want to see the rematch because this first one, I mean, was it a classic? I feel like it felt like a classic. I'm just putting that out there now. I don't know how history is going to tell the story, but I felt as I was watching it, I felt like, oh my God, this fight's way better than I could have imagined. Like, seriously, this fight over delivered, but they don't need to run it back. This was such a rough fight. I would say for both, and it was rough for both, but I feel like especially for Eubank Jr., it just seemed like at a point he just put his head down and it almost seemed like he was fighting in a dreamlike state and was just saying, no, screw this. If this guy's going to have to knock me out because I am coming forward. I am giving him everything that I've got. I'm going to put all these punches together. You know, this guy's going to have to take me out. Chris Eubank Jr. had attitude in this one. So did Conor Benn, but Chris Eubank Jr. just basically said in a very forceful way, demonstratively, like, no, I am not going to let this welterweight beat me. I will be damned if this welterweight beats me. Look, Chris Eubank Jr. could not afford to lose this fight. I know that there was a rematch clause, but he could not afford to lose to the welterweight. Conor Benn, there were ways where he could lose and still and it enhanced his career. If Chris Eubank Jr. loses, there's no moral victory. You were the middleweight, you lost to the welterweight, period, point blank. Conor Benn picks up momentum after this decision loss to Chris Eubank Jr. Everybody wants to see Conor Benn fight again. Chris Eubank Jr., I mean, I don't need to see him fight Janibek. I mean, does he still have actual title aspirations? I mean, he fought for a title back, several years ago when he challenged George Groves at 168. Does he have actual title aspirations at middleweight right now? And how would he do against two-belt holder Janibek? How would he do against Carlos Adames? Now, I guess if there was a division where you could pick up a belt, now would be the time to do it at middleweight, right? You've got a 40-something-year-old Erislandy Lara who, in fairness, has been knocking his opponents out, from Danny Garcia to Michael Zarafa to Cornflake LaManna to Spike O'Sullivan. I know those last two names were less impressive, but Erislandy Lara has been sitting on that left hand. And look, that would be the one guy I would want to see Eubank Jr. fight at middleweight. Eubank Jr., again, is 35. Erislandy Lara is much older, but he's also a southpaw, a technician, a sweet scientist, and he's holding a belt. So Chris Eubank Jr. has never been a major champion. He's had a IBO belt in the past, but never one of the 4 major belts. That would be his chance. If they can make a fight with Chris Eubank Jr. and Erislandy Lara, give me that one. Outside of that, I don't think Eubank Jr. beats Carlos Adames. Not to say that Carlos Adames is a world beater, but let's start giving this guy some credit. He's beaten Derevianchenko. He's beaten Julian J. Rock Williams. He should have beaten Hamza Shiraz. They called it a draw, but Carlos Adames should get a lot of credit for how that fight played out, because most people thought Shiraz was going to win that one. So I don't know how Chris Eubank Jr. does against Carlos Adames, but I just feel like it would be more appropriate to have him fight the old guy, Erislandy Lara, right? And try to challenge him for that. I think it's the WBA title. So yeah, if it's not that, what are you sticking around for? Like, you took a big beating at the hands of Conor Benn. You got stopped now 4 fights ago, and you just picked up your biggest payday. I doubt that his next fight is going to merit the type of money. Again, this was just a lightning in a bottle scenario, and Chris Eubank Jr. should just be cashing out. And again, if it's not Erislandy Lara, just call it a career. No, you didn't. Did Chris Eubank Jr. live up to his potential career-wise? I would say no. Personally, I would say no. He has fought some good fighters, and he's got a couple pretty good wins. He's got a few pretty good wins, but I thought that his talent should have earned him a better overall resume. And it's interesting because the way that he fought the second half of this fight against Conor Benn was more akin to how he was fighting earlier in his career before he got with Roy Jones Jr. So yeah, this was a barn burner. This exceeded expectations. I can't see how a viewer can walk away from this fight feeling less than absolutely delighted. I'm not even saying satisfied, but a step beyond that, delighted. This was everything that you would want in a grudge match. It was gritty. This was pure violence. I mean, it really was. And again, there were ebbs and flows, and there were times where each guy was hurt, multiple times where each guy was hurt. And Chris Eubank Jr., like he should have, pulled off the decision win, 8-4 on all three judges' scorecards. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this fight in the comments. Did this go how you thought it was going to go? Look, I didn't think that this was just going to like devolve into like that type of a phone booth ordeal throughout the second half of the fight. Like the first half of the fight was exciting too, but that second half was just both of these guys were just head down, trying to take each other's heads off, trying to take each other's souls out. And Chris Eubank Jr. acknowledged after the fight that everything surprised him about his opponent. That Conor Benn, it just exceeded every expectation that he had of him. He didn't know that Conor Benn had that dog in him. He didn't know Conor Benn had that type of resilience, that type of power, that type of chin, all of that. Chris Eubank Jr. ended up being involved in a fight that was probably much more difficult than he thought it was going to be, but he still dug deep because there were times where it was looking kind of shaky, and Chris Eubank Jr. did what he had to do, and he dug deep, and he made this one damn near a brawl. This was not a pretty fight. This was a rugged, violent fight. And yeah, I want your thoughts on this one because it was highly anticipated and we just got what we got. I think everyone's pretty thrilled by what we just saw. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. And also let me know what you would want to see Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn do next. Do you want to see them run it back? And if not, what would you want to see each of them do individually? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for tuning in.